Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Because I Cared, written by AdmiralStarNight. I remember the day very clearly. It was late. Dinner had been eaten, and I was outside fooling around with my friends. You know, like kids do. When a loud boom and crashing sound had startled us all. One of the kids claimed to have seen a streak of fire across the sky, but the rest of us hadn't, so we doubted. We all ran home to our parents as they stepped out of their small town houses to look around in confusion. Of course, they all talked, and a few of them set out in a direction some pointed as the destination of whatever had crashed. I was curious and wanted to go, but Dad said no. It could be dangerous. Let the adults handle it. I barely slept that night. I looked out the window, seeing nothing but darkness and the thin sliver of waning moon. I tossed and turned, wondering what it could have been. A weapon, a meteor, aliens. So I waited, and eventually the next day, news spread around that nothing was found. Must have just been a meteor that passed over the mountain and had landed in dense wilderness. Of course, us, being kids, went out after school and poked around in the forest and creek, pretending to be invaders and jumping at each other to scare ourselves until we were rolling with laughter. It was getting dark and time to go home when something caught my eye. I stopped and looked at it, but it was in a very noticeable place. In the crook of a tree that was gnarled and aging was a strange glimmer of purple. But it was getting darker by the second, and Mom would be very mad if I stayed out in the dark, so I went home. The next day, after school and dinner, I told Mom I was going to play around the creek, since it was going to be Saturday tomorrow. If I stayed up a little late, she wouldn't mind. She gave me the usual warnings about staying safe and not getting mud in my shoes before sending me off. I ran through the woods to the old gnarled tree, and it was still there. That weird glimmer of purple nestled in the crook of the tree. No flower or bird around here looked like that. So with determination, I began to climb the tree, hand and feet finding easy perches on the rough bark and branches until I was eye level with the thing. I do not know what I expected to find. A balloon, maybe. A trail camera of a hunter, maybe. I definitely did not expect to find a glowing purple egg about as big as my head, its surface rough like a rock. I touched it. It was warm, and I pulled my hand away quickly, afraid for a moment before steeling my nerves and laying a hand on it again. It was just warm, not hot, and the rough rock-like texture felt like any other rock I might pick up in the dirt. I took it out of the tree. I forget how. I think I took off my shirt to wrap it up and drop it into a pile of leaves and moss on the ground. Silly, I know. But I did, and I remember just looking at the egg. I didn't understand what I had found, but per the rules of finders keepers, it was mine, and I didn't want Mom to tell me to throw it in the creek, or Dad to try and take it for some project or whatever. No, this would be my glowing rock thing, and I was going to make sure it stayed mine. So I stashed it away in the hollow of a fallen tree, surrounding it with sticks and leaves to muffle the glow until I could return the next day. And return I did, every day. Sometimes just quickly passing it, too busy to check on it while with friends, sometimes alone. Summer lapsed into autumn, and the leaves fell from all the trees. I had to be careful in the woods in case hunters were out, wearing an old but still bright safety vest so I would not be shot. I worried someone would stumble over my special glowing item, so one night I smuggled it home and hid it under a great pine tree in my backyard, with needles so thick on the ground your feet could sink into them like snow. I did my usual thing, buried the egg in the needles and leaves near the trunk of the tree, and felt better that I had it closer to home. At least, until 2 nights later, when I heard a sharp crack that woke me from my sleep. I got up and looked outside, but I didn't see any deer in the moonlight, no bears or coyotes. Curious as most children are, I grabbed my dad's warm jacket, Then I snuck out the back to see what had happened. As I pointed my flashlight over where I'd hidden my prize, I felt my stomach drop. The lump of needles that had formed its cover had scattered all over the place with flecks of dull purple rocks everywhere. My prized possession was gone. I had wanted to cry, because what would be cooler than having your own glowing rock? Then I spotted the hole and saw movement. Had a fox stolen my rock? So I stuck the flashlight close to the entrance of the den, and the eyes that looked at me were not a fox, or any animal I knew. The noise it made was more like a cross between a cicada and a cricket, and when I fell back in surprise, mute with horror, it crawled out. It had 6 legs like most insects, looking like a bigger ant with long antennae and a sort of dull purple coloring to its exoskeleton. A giant purple ant thing, maybe. I probably should have screamed or ran or told the police or something. But for some reason, I just stared at it as it clambered closer, running its antennae over me to study me before it began to focus intently on the pocket of my dad's jacket. I reached in there and pulled out a small handful of butterscotch candies. Instantly, the creature crawled nearly up on my lap to try and get at them. I unwrapped them one at a time and tossed them away, the strange insect scurrying over to chow one down and then get the next one, reminding me of a dog. When I was all out, it searched around for more in the dirt before coming back over to me and running its mandibles over my hand as though asking for more. I had said, "I'm sorry, I don't have anything else on me." For some reason, I imagined it looked disappointed as it slunk back into its den it had carved under the pine tree, pulling shut a plug of pine leaves and dirt over it to conceal it. I guess I should fast forward. Don't have forever. I was a kid, but a kid that could do chores, of course. And being the enterprising soul I was, I shoveled driveways and sidewalks for money I would save and secretly use to buy various things to feed the strange insect that had been born from the egg. Like a secret dog, but cooler now. Mom and Dad never suspected a thing. It hoovered up everything I brought it, mushy peas to rock candy. It loved to eat. Sometimes it would even let me pet it. All through winter, I cared for it, and on New Year's, Mom and Dad had gone to a party. I managed to lead it out into the woods, into a new den I had dug for it, because it was growing super fast, and if it stayed in my yard, it would topple the pine tree with its den. It grew and grew until I realized my little treats were no longer its main fuel. Once it started hunting deer and even coyotes, it accepted my foodish treats, like a well-fed cat would a fish. A few years passed at this point, and it became a local cryptid. Stories of fresh deer bones stripped perfectly clean with no decay and a sharp decrease in local coyotes make people come up with tall tales. I knew, I just didn't speak. It grew bigger, and honestly, I kept the secret because it felt right. I always brought it butterscotch candies when I could. It seemed to like those the best. It was always friendly. Or maybe it just saw me as a source of sugar. Even once it had grown to be as tall as my hip, it never scared me or hurt me, just always looked at me with those strange eyes for the sugary treats. Then, one day, when I was a freshman in high school, I went back to the den entrance, only to find it collapsed. No fresh bones or anything. I tried my best to dig through the dirt, but without equipment I couldn't excavate the den. So I mourned the loss of the insect and moved on. I went to college and got a job. Occasionally, I would have a butterscotch candy and think over what happened to the insect I'd been raising. Never discussed it, though. Everyone would think I'd gone mad. And then Christmas happened. I came home for the holidays. Hugs, kisses, gifts passed around whilst we sat at the fire and told stories of past Christmases with the neighbors. Then the lights went out. The town's rarely used emergency siren went off, and as we all leaned out the door to listen to the voice echo across the valley, "This is a state of emergency. Please stay inside your homes until further notice." Much worried chatter as the young adults all dove onto the phones to find out what was going on, while my dad went to get his emergency radio. The phone's internet was patchy and slow, but panic and fear were everywhere. about the invasion. Even as I read that, my ears picked up the sound that I heard many years ago when I was small, the sound of something falling from the sky. I peeked out curtained windows to see streaks of fire in the sky, and as I watched in horror, I could feel the ground beneath me shake as they impacted the ground. Even as I watched with the crowd behind me gather, one streak smashed hard into the road in front of my parents' house, smoke and dust clearing to reveal a sort of pod, all ragged and glowing blue. Seemed to unseal like a rotting banana peel to let out horrible-looking insects, like armored bugs straight out of the worst nightmares of science fiction imagination. Dark blue light pulsed in their bodies while sharp legs and appendages looked for stuff to impale on the hunt. They made horrible keening noises and began to stalk around. Some of them battering in windows of houses, thankfully empty as they were all here, sharing the Christmas festivities, sharing in the fear as they watched these aliens walk around outside in mute horror. It was so silent. I heard it first. It sounded like a cicada and a cricket rolled into one. Soft, but getting louder. The sound of something hitting the roof of our house made several of the occupants scream, and even more tumbled back from the window as what landed on the roof stepped into the front yard. The insect I had so cared for, or so I believed, it was almost as big as the house now. What had once been smooth, now covered in jagged carapace, antennae long enough they cracked through the air like whips, and a long, ragged horn in the center of its head. I step out to get a better look, ignoring the shouts from my father to come back as I do. Outside, the giant insect squashes one of the blue ones and roars a challenge to the skies so loud I clap my hands over my ears. The answering roar I did not expect, but it happened nonetheless. A giant streak of fire crashing into the house across the street, and from the smoke and flame stepped another giant ant-like creature, this one similar, yet different. It was larger, and the light pulsing within it was a deep blue, like the pond that had crashed into the street. Its horn jagged in different ways. As it stood there, it raised wings that looked to have a million eyes on it, flashed it, the glowing running through the eye pattern to make them much, much more threatening. My purple one responded in kind, raising hidden wings with a subtle, different eye pattern, and pulsing in warm, standing firmly between the enemy and I. Then they charged at each other, clashing like two deer over a mate, locking their horns and trying to push each other over, their strange calls echoing with murderous rage around us tiny humans. I saw one of the smaller ones try to latch onto Purple's legs, and sanity left me. I picked up a rock from the landscaping and threw it hard at the smaller insect, hitting it dead in the eye and causing it to drop to the ground in pain, before it got up and charged, blind in one eye. My ears began to ring before I even realized the shotgun went off and the insect dropped. I turned to see my dad reloading his shotgun, and once done, he tossed me hearing protection. I put it on and tightened it as I grabbed the shotgun out of my dad's hand. It had been a while since I shot it, but I knew how to use it and ran out. Just in time to watch Purple get bodied by the blue insect, crumpled in the street and trying to stand as the blue one began to advance, horn lowered, an obvious intent to kill in every disgusting line of the invader's insectoid body. I aimed and fired. The shot harmlessly bounced off the armor, but made the giant blue insect pause and turn towards me, rearing up and giving a god-awful screech that shook the ground. I would have turned to run if I hadn't felt frozen in place by fear, unsure what stupidity had overcome me to try and shoot down a giant armored insect with a human-sized shotgun. I was dead. I had to be. As the insect reared up, intent to smash me and my home into the afterlife, Purple suddenly was there, charging into the side of the giant blue insectoid, horn piercing through its armor like a hot knife through butter. The blue one screeched in pain as Purple violently shook its head, causing dark blue and black liquids to gush out of the wound. I just watched as Purple dislodged the large insect from its horn and raised itself up, towering over the now crumpled form of the dark blue challenger, and came down like a ton of bricks on the dying insect's head. Purple stood over the corpse, surprisingly easy to see the fatigue in its legs. And for a moment, it was all silent before suddenly Purple whipped its head back and screamed a noise so loud the ringing in my ears only grew worse, even with the protection. A few smaller insects still alive stopped what they were doing and turned to face Purple. The streaks of fire I occasionally still glimpsed in the sky stopped, and the world held its breath. They then bowed down to Purple, and the pulsing blue in their bodies began to fade, only moments later to fade back in Purple, now calmer and silent, no longer causing destruction and chaos. I walked out, stunned and unable to really grasp what I had just seen, carefully approaching Purple. I looked up at the large insect with awe and wonder, just like a kid that had found a cool rock in the woods. It looks down at me, gives me a surprisingly soft cricket-like chirp, and gently runs an antenna over my pocket of my pants. I laugh, feeling half mad. I reach into the pocket and pull out the butterscotch candy I had stashed in there. I fed it to Purple, and despite the size difference, it seemed to enjoy it, as it seemed to sit down in the middle of the street, watching as more insects with no coloring pulsing in their bodies crawled around bushes and homes to gather around the new leader. Their color quickly fading into purple as they bowed to the new leader. A queen? Yes, a queen just like ants, I think. Then the sounds of sirens and helicopters and you guys showed up. What? I was a small-town kid. I didn't think anyone would believe me. Anyways, look at her. She's friendly. She and her bugs even tried to put the walls back up to the house the alien bug leader smashed. Though that was definitely not up to code. Can't imagine a big blue one being that nice. Also, you wouldn't happen to have around 1,000,000 butterscotch candies laying around, would you? I'd like to treat the queen to a proper victory feast. Look, my hearing's still a bit stuffy. You have to speak up. Oh, why did she come to save me? I don't know. Maybe it's because I cared. End of story. I would just like to thank the T5 supporters. Bushmaster 117, Casper Arnholtz, Draxzoon WRE, Elijah Silvercross, Gray, John Carrington, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.